Do 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 do. People been jumping down my throat today and yesterday on where are the videos at? It's like, well, I've been incredibly busy and insanely sick. It hasn't rained here for over 3 weeks. My allergies are absolutely murdering me. Life is short, and I believe that life shouldn't be spent watching BS. But anyway, if enough people convince me, and I don't watch Joe Rogan at all. I watched the Bob Lazar episode and nearly fell asleep. But everybody told me to watch the Neil deGrasse Tyson episode with Joe Rogan. By the way, I don't know why everybody wants me to go on Joe Rogan. I've had hundreds of people tell me that. I mean, he looks he looks inebriated and all of the time, inebriated and stoned, and I'm not a fan of that sort of state of being, but each to their own. But anyway, after so many people told me to watch the Neil deGrasse Tyson interview with Joe Rogan, I started making a list of just unbelievable, insane, laughable, illogical, nonsensical, absurd, stupid things that this guy was saying that I gave up. It's like, there's just too much here. If I made a video about this, it'd have to be a 6-part series of videos. I literally watched one of the most insane, nonsensical things I've seen in a long time. The last thing I saw from the Cult of Quantum, that absurd, was from the late Richard Feynman, and it's all over YouTube. You just type in, Richard Feynman explains magnetism. He doesn't explain it at all. He sits in a hot chair and he talks about an old woman slipping on the ice, and he just twitches and squirms, and eventually says, well, it's just too complicated. You know, there's no way I could explain it to you so that your mind will understand it, which is a academic way of saying I have no effing clue, but I'm going to pretend that I do, but also, assume that you're not smart. No, it's ridiculous. I just couldn't believe watching this guy try to explain gravity. It was just absolutely mind-numbing. Just mind-numbing. Nikola Tesla once said, today is theirs, but the future is mine. I mean, Nikola Tesla understood a lot of stuff that eventually would come to pass, and he knew that the future was implosion technology, and not literally implosion, but the opposite of explosion technology, of course, where we burn everything. He understood a lot of stuff. I'm not actually putting Nikola Tesla far too high on a peak, but he did see far, far beyond his days. I made a huge discovery in the writings and musings of Nikola Tesla, and in a book of collected Nikola Tesla writings called Tesla Said. You could download it. It's everywhere online. The book is called Tesla Said. I have write about that in the 3rd edition of my book on magnetism. But getting to the point on gravity, I mean, I knew how ignorant this guy was that did the interview, but I had no idea he was that laughably ignorant. I mean, it was just beyond the pale. I actually shouldn't be surprised, because nothing surprises me anymore. When we talk about gravity, there's no autonomous field modality known as gravity. Gravity doesn't exist. That's not to say the phenomenon known as gravity doesn't exist. Obviously so it does. It is incoherent mutual mass acceleration, but masses are not accelerating towards one another. Neither is there any such thing as magnetic attraction, but the premise of magnetic attraction has existed for thousands and thousands of years, since the ancient Chinese discovered lodestones, and also to the Greeks. But there's no such thing as magnetic attraction. Magnetism is denotatively force in motion. It is literally the creation of space through a toroidal vector, i.e. a force vector. What we're actually looking at is dielectric acceleration towards counter space. In watching magnets, bad allergies, watching magnets accelerate towards one another underneath a supercell, I mean, I saw what I already knew to be the case after countless years of deep thought into magnetism, is that they are not actually accelerating towards one another. Superficially so, well, sure they are. No, they're not. Superficially, one would think that masses are mutually accelerating towards one another, but they're not. They're accelerating towards a null pressure point. Everything in Mother Nature's universe, or natura naturans, is pressure mediation. By the way, the most simplex, off-topic here, but not really, the smallest, once again, allergies, the smallest pressure mediation for mass is shaped like a watermelon or a sphere, not a pancake. Some of you are going to get that inside joke, which is not a joke. Let me repeat that again. The lowest pressure mediation for matter is shaped like a watermelon or an orange or a basketball, not a pancake. I had to drop that little joke in there. Repeat hashtag PancakeGate. That's going to piss a lot of people off. When we think about gravity, people are mutually and incorrectly associating that with weight, but weight is only expression of the mutual vectors of each mass, because weight is field specific, weight is medium specific, weight is vector specific, weight is mass specific. Mass and weight are two completely different things. And when we say medium specific, to give a really crude analogy, I mean like a 6-year-old girl can never move around like, say, a 600-pound dude. I'm not that damn heavy. I'm 260 pounds. But she easily could if that person were in a different medium, in this case floating in the water, in which case a 6-year-old girl could move around easily a 600-pound dude. Okay, there's a very, very simplex analogy of a medium, but of weight. Allergies suck. Don't ever take a note to self. Never take a Benadryl early in the morning. Makes you kind of loopy. I've been suffering from these allergies for about a week now. I hope it rains eventually, but that's in reference to weight. But people don't understand what gravity is, and gravity is not an autonomous field modality, and there is no such thing as magnetic attraction. The distinction and differentiation is the same as that between a light bulb and a laser. One is point source and the other one is non-point source. A 5-watt light bulb is useless, analogously to read by. It's useless, right? 5-watt laser will burn a hole in your ass. It's dangerous. It'll put your eye out. 5 watts is 5 watts, right? No, it's not. The nature of the attribute is radically different between the two. Amazingly, if you ever want to trip someone up, just ask them, and I've done this many times, and it's not a trick question, ask them to define what a magnet is. Well, a magnet is well, let's get down to nitty-gritty. Before a magnet becomes a magnet, it is quantitatively the same exact object, as when it becomes. Pre-magnet, not a magnet, and now a magnet. They're both exactly the same object. So, since it is not quantitative, obviously so what denotes and defines a magnet must be qualitative. Yes, that's correct. Well, what's a magnet? Well, a magnet has a magnetic field. No! The magnetic field was pre-existent in it before it became a magnet. The differentiation is now its point source, and thereby which the ether perturbation caused from that point source field geometry is now ab extra to the object itself. That was a really important point if you want to back it up. Yep. That was my attempt at humor. I'm sticking the video recording in reverse. Anyway, I can wax poetically and specifically, succinctly, logically, demonstrably on the topic of gravity. If all these people want me to go on Joe Rogan, I'm not interested in really being interviewed by anybody. But I mean, that was so obnoxious. This is what, the guy's nothing other than a Hollywood scientist. It's okay not to know the answers to stuff. When someone says, I don't know, it's like, I don't know the answer. Well, that is actually an intelligent answer. It is? Yes. I would much rather someone say, I've been thinking about that topic for a really long time. I don't yet know the answer, but I think I'm very close. I'll get back to you on that. That is an intelligent answer. Here is what is not an intelligent. What's gravity? Well, gravity is it's complicated for me to explain to you. You have to have a degree in quantum mechanics, and you got to start by reading Niels Bohr, Leonard Susskind, and most importantly, Richard Feynman. Start reading his book, QED, Strange Theory of Light and Matter. Start with some of his academic notes from the years of 19... Academic hubris. This is what these scumbags do. It is okay not to know the answers to stuff. The problem lies, first off, in pretending to know the answer, Well, I'm an academic, I have a PhD. It doesn't mean anything. All that means is you regurgitated a bunch of crap you're taught how to learn. The second thing is if someone self-deludes themselves, well, I know this because I studied this crap and I got a PhD. Yeah, so what? Nobody, and this is really, really important, and no one has ever talked about this before on anything I've ever read or watched. You never go looking to the answers to things that you already think you know the answers to. Yeah? You would never, like, investigate the secret of your mother's name, would you? Because you already know it, right? Why would someone want to investigate the nature of gravity or magnetism if they think they already know it? They don't. I had a guy email me yesterday. He says, I took you up on your offer to ask a PhD physicist. Ask him just very, very simply like a child, what is a field? In itself, by itself, a field itself. They said, he told me that the scientist had a conniption, he literally imploded mentally. It's the simple stuff that gets them. You can't get them to define the term energy because science has never defined energy. It's never defined a field. Sure it has. No, it hasn't. Science has never, anywhere, defined the term field. Or it could be the Greek word kora. Never. Anyway, getting back to the topic of gravity. There's 1,000 things I wanted to say on gravity. And of course I'm doing this freehand. I'm actually mentally in free form. I'm not actually looking at my iPad right now. This is not an autonomous field modality. This is merely a nuance of attribution. So-called magnetic attraction and so-called gravity are exactly the same thing. Just as is laser light and incandescent light from a light bulb, exactly the same thing. No, it's radically different. No, they're both light, right? Yeah, but nah. No, they're exactly the same thing. Mother Nature is a lot more simplex. There's not multiple things, yeah? Be like a stupid child thinking ice, water, and steam are 3 different things. Like, no, my ignorant child, ice, water, and steam are the same thing. They're different temperature and pressure modalities of one and the same entity, i.e. the water molecule, right? Yes, of course they are. There's no such thing as gravity versus magnetism versus dielectricity versus electricity. Specifically, number 1, gravity does not exist. It is incoherent mutual mass acceleration. So boom, it's nothing other than an attribute of dielectricity. Electricity is also not a field modality. It is phi times psi equals q in Planck of electrification. You can look that up if you like. Charles Brody-Steinmetz said that. Eric Dollard said that. And of course he was only mimicking what Charles Brody-Steinmetz has said. Electricity is a hybrid. And of course this makes explaining how an electromagnet works really, really easy. By dumping its dielectric component, magnetism is therefore left. You ever seen the inside of a large magnetic coil like they use for lifting up cars at the scrapyard? Explaining even, and this was in 1913 when Charles Brody-Steinmetz wrote this on page 24, I believe, of electrical discharges, waves, and impulses. He said at that time, over 100 years ago, that scientists had overtly complicated the real meaning or the real definition or the principle of electricity. And he is right. The guy was right. It was already screwed up over 100 years ago. It has stayed completely screwed up ever since then. When I say dielectricity or electrostatics, what? People usually have heard electrostatics, but they've not heard, what, dielectricity? What, did you invent that or something? Did you come up with that pull that out of your butt? Like, no. The greatest minds of field theory have been talking about that since day one. You just don't hear that term anymore. All of this stuff is divinely simplex. It's not simple. Erasing all the BS and getting to the nitty-gritty of what things are is the tough part because everything's been so convoluted. I've talked to a lot of electricians like, I never learned any of this stuff when I became an electrician. Or there's a few people I've talked to with a PhD in electrical engineering. I never learned any of this stuff. I heard of like dielectrics once, like in my freshman or sophomore year. Anyway, I digress. But when I watched that interview from that fool, that mental midget, I was like, Jesus. I started making note. Wow, that's crazy. That's wrong. This is wrong. I started writing so much as like I give up. Every sentence out of this fool's mouth was absurd twaddle, poppycock. Anyway. And that's the famous scientist for you. This is what the cult of quantum has brought you. It's like a religion. It's a religion of BS and nonsense, like talking about angels, unicorns, and leprechaun farts. Except in their case, it's all these fantasy particles that don't exist, like photons, electrons. Yeah, photon is purely a conceptual idea. There's no such thing as a photon particle. It's completely absurd, completely ludicrous, unbelievable. This is what happens when you base your entire schema upon atomism. You build your foundation upon atomism, everything becomes nonsensical blather. You have to build a foundation of cosmic mechanics on the ether, or it doesn't work. Because you can't explain instantaneous action at a distance. You can't explain the nature of light. Because if you believe light is a wave or a particle or a wave particle, it doesn't work. It can't work. You can't explain the observed phenomena of light that way. Light is not being emitted from A. Light is not moving from point A to point B. Light does not have a speed. Light's not a wave. Light's not a particle. All these fundamental preconceptions that are intellectual midgetry have no basis in fact as far as the nature of light. But this digresses from discussion on gravity. Anyway, I will return to being miserable with my allergies, and thank you so much for watching. Lux e Veritas.